Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for the Books That Make You show. My name is Desiree Duffy, and I'm your host. And today we're talking about books that make you wonder what would happen if your past suddenly vanished. Imagine going on a bike ride. The sun is shining. Life is good. You don't have a care in the world until a split-second decision propels you into a different version of your life. It's like a glitch in the matrix. And suddenly you're on your way to discovering that the nature of the universe might not be what you thought it was. Becky Parker Geist is the author of The Left Turn, Two Lives, Worlds Apart. The book is a metaphysical fiction, women's fiction. It's got a few genres mashing up, which I absolutely love. It is a jaunt into the Twilight Zone, but it's also one that gives people a bit of hope and possibly a new outlook on life. Now, Becky Parker Geist has been writing and performing since she was a child. She is now the CEO of Pro Audio Voices, providing audiobook production and marketing. She's also the president of the Bay Area Independent Publishers Association. And Becky revels in being immersed in the world of independent publishing. Becky, such an honor. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here.
This is fun. This is fun. I mean, because you're doing something different with this book too, as far as releasing it. The audiobook is available and people can listen to that. We'll give everybody the details on that. But first, what I want to talk about is this book, this masterpiece that you've written. It's fiction, and it involves, well, I'll let you do it. Can you kind of set up the stage and tell us the gist of the book?
Sure. Yeah. I'm real interested in exploring this sort of that point where the world cracks open just a little bit for us, and we start to see that, oh, maybe it's not this harsh, fixed reality that I thought it was. Maybe it is something a little more magical, a little more mystical, a little more fluid or flexible, and maybe I have some more creative power and agency in the world. So a lot of what this their journey, the character's journey, is about is based on new science, and we call it new science, but it's actually decades old. Even though it's still, it's increasingly known in the mainstream, but still not considered mainstream. And we're talking about things like quantum physics and consciousness research, and there's a tremendous amount of what was considered frontier science that where they're clearly demonstrably proving through very clear scientific method that things are a lot different than the way we've been told. So we're not a bunch of conglomerations of billiard balls bouncing off each other. We are much more Wi-Fi.
Yeah. We are energy. We are waves. We are part of this multiverse and a split universe. So tell us what the split universe, why the split universe? Tell us how that functions in the story.
Sure. Yeah. So in the story, it's a device to create, and I'm going to preface this with saying that it's a device that came to me that I didn't think, oh, I want to create this thing and I'll use this device to do it. It was more like the story came to me and then I was like, oh, that's interesting. Look what it does. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective of now having realized what it does is it releases our characters from that baggage that we carry on a daily basis. The who I am, which we build on every day, and our yesterdays significantly impacts our today. Well, suddenly they're in a situation where it's like their yesterday is so foggy, they really are not accessing it. And so the device functions to force our characters into looking at, okay, who am I now? You know, and we get I think we are so often so busy looking in the rearview mirror as to who we have been and dealing with what's immediately behind us, that we forget that if we just shift our gaze a little bit, we can actually see where we're going much more clearly, safely too, if we're thinking about cars. But but it opens up that potential to be able to explore our now and our direction going forward.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. That's a great premise. And I'm interested too in, was there an experience, something that happened that inspired the story?
There was. I did not sit down and plan to write a story. I was actually on a bike ride in that exact space. Um, my now ex-husband was riding several blocks ahead of me. He was, racing along. And I
Mm.
had that exact moment where I was like, what if I just turned left? You know, and that thought, I didn't turn left, but that thought, as I rode along, it started to build into this whole scene in my head. And, while that happens with lots of what ifs, they're bouncing around in my head all the time. But in this case, that scene just kept, it like formulated, it became something. And I very quickly knew as well the end, and it stayed with me. So I thought, well, I guess I better write it down. So I did, and then, a few days later, I was doing something else, and it was like some other scene just, like, dropped into my head that was related, and I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll write that down too," and so it came to me in kind of a popcorn way, up to a point where I thought, "I guess I better figure out how they all fit together," and
Mhm.
then I created an outline and created some chapters that hadn't just arrived in that popcorn way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great story. Well, I have to imagine in another universe, Becky, you did turn left, right?
I'm sure that I must have. And what an interesting, exploration that would have been. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe that's where it's coming from. There is another universe out there with Becky who turned left, and now she's writing that story in this universe as fiction.
Oh, I
Ah,
love that.
I
I
love
love
that too.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mentioned too, I'm obsessed with glitch in the matrix stories. I'll give a shout out to Paranormal Rising, which is also on YouTube, and they pull stories from Reddit, from threads on Reddit. And there is a lot of stories of people who find themselves dealing with time shifts or glitches. They'll meet their doppelganger, and it just makes you wonder. You take a lot of them with a grain of salt, but like you're saying, because this is based on the science as we're discovering the multiverse and we're, making advances in the fields of quantum physics, if there might just be a there,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. The whole thing about waves of potential, and then observation makes things collapse into a particle. I mean, it's just it's so mind-blowing when you actually, like, let yourself kind of try to wrap your mind around it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that in itself, because especially because and maybe it's always felt this way, I don't know, through our time as humans, but it feels like these are hard times. Like there are a lot of really significant challenges that we're facing socially, environmentally. There's so many things. And so it can feel like, wow, it, life is rough. But this potential, looking at the world with a more open perspective shifts that. it helps us to see what, that it's not just that. There's something a whole lot more going on, and when we open up to that, it's so much more. I think there's a lot more light, a lot more hope, a lot more inspiration, and my one of my biggest goals is to help make the world a better place, so, uh, it's
Yeah.
a fun space to explore.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know a lot of people who've read advanced copies of your book and who are beginning to read it and listen to it now are saying that it inspired them and it did give them hope. That message of hope is resonating, I feel, loud
Yeah.
and clear. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and how, some of the main characters in your story are dealing because they're dealing with heavy stuff, right? This
They
I,
are.
I set it up as, la la la, we're riding a bike and it's sunny and everything's good. But actually
Yeah.
everything's not so good for your characters, is
It
it?
it it starts out, they're dealing with some really hard stuff. Hannah, the primary protagonist, has had when she was a child, she grew up in an abusive situation. It was um she had some really hard stuff to deal with.
Talk a little bit about Hannah because I set the scene up so that in the beginning they're riding through on their bikes and it's sunshine and life is good. But really, for your characters, life isn't quite so great. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yes. Yeah, Hannah is dealing with some heavy things. She had a really difficult childhood, and I she does have still access to that, because partly because we want to be able to not be untethered completely, but also so that we can address what are some of these things that many of us, deal with. And also, there's a heaviness to the way that life feels for her. You know, there are so many people now who feel depressed, have anxiety. I mean, this is a very, very common experience for people. And so she's dealing with some of that as well. So it gives us also this kind of darker place to begin,
Mhm.
where many people are today, this dark place. And this the device of the left turn allows us then to take a look at what, sort of opening up the door, bringing in the light, and finding that much uh sunnier experience. So the external world, yes, it's a beautiful sunny day and gorgeous in San Francisco Bay Area. Internally, there's a lot of dark storm going on.
Yeah, yeah, and that's just reflective of how people are. That's how
Yeah.
we are. Does Hannah's journey in any way reflect your own?
Her journey does in some ways. I will say that her childhood, her upbringing is extremely different from my own. I had wonderful, supportive, very loving parents. Um, the journey from that feeling of being sort of under a dark cloud and moving into, this sort of lighter, brighter, more expansive, more creative space is definitely a journey that I've experienced.
Mhm,
I A
mhm,
lot of the things that like so I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area and lived there for about 37 years. I moved there in my 20s, and before I moved, I remember thinking a lot of the stuff that now I hold as absolutely valid and true, I thought was just way too woo-woo for me. It's like, okay, going to the Bay Area, I understand it's like there are people talking about stuff that I think is pretty far out there, uh but it was a matter of a few experiences that just started to let me take sort of peek through the peek hole,
mhm.
and that was enough over time, over gradually, it was gradual, that I discovered that, "Oh, okay." My mind was opening to the potentials and possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to experience it to truly learn it. When we're younger, there's a lot of religions and there's processes and traditions that we go through the motions, right? It becomes
Right.
ingrained in us. And some of
Right.
us gravitate and hold on to that, and that's fine. But in many cases, I find people like you and so many others too, you need to go on this journey. This is why you're here, to learn these things in order to accept them, not just because somebody handed it to you on a platter and said, this is what you need to believe.
Right.
And I gotta tell you something too, Becky. The thing that just always gets me going is when I talk to authors like yourself, so many authors, and your book happens to be fiction, but I talk to many nonfiction authors too, and people who are either psychologists, they're doctors, they're experts, they're lawyers. They all have different experiences in this world, but somehow, in some way, it all kind of feels like it's that old allegory of the elephant, right? They're all
Mm.
seeing the world and seeing truth, but from their own viewpoint, from their own path. And so
Yeah.
they're all holding on to different parts of the elephant, but the elephant in its entirety is what's important, not just that somebody's got the tail and somebody else has got the trunk.
Right.
Yeah.
There was one of the most beautiful gifts my mom ever gave me as a thought, as a concept, was in talking about about different religions and how, what's that about? If there's one God, how come we have all these different religions? It was something about that. But what she said was, it's like a prism. We're all looking through different sides of the prism, but it's the same prism. It's the same light. And I love that visual. It has been very helpful overall in my journey and staying open.
Yeah. Sounds like your mother was a very wise woman.
I
I
think
love
she
I love
was.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So the book. Oh, I love it. This is a great conversation. Um, so let's talk about how your book compares to some other books, writings, movies that are out there. Is there any authors or other books that have been influential to you in writing The Left Turn?
Yes, several. There are several that have been more influential in terms of my thinking about it, and those are more in the nonfiction realm. Lynn McTaggart, Jack Canfield are a couple. Lynn McTaggart, especially, because her books early on were some of the ones I was reading and going, "Oh my gosh, I didn't. Oh wow," Um, and then, more recently, some of the books that I feel like, oh, we're sort of in that same realm, like Matt Haig's Midnight Library, Josie Silver's The Two Lives of Lydia Bird, um, and I mean, even Paul Coelho, who has the Alchemist, which is
Mhm.
extremely popular and famous book. It's that story as well is of a person on a journey trying to figure something very essential out about life. And the one of the big differences, I think, is that that's set in a different culture and in a different time period, but it is like a mythic journey. And I want to I wanted to really partly because it came to me this way, but also I feel like I want to stay in our contemporary fiction realm, partly because I feel like we can maybe most easily relate to that. And one of my hopes is that my readers and listeners will have those experiences of noticing more of the synchronicities in their own lives. You know, uh, becoming a little more conscious of what is going on around them and some of the patterns that show up can be
Mhm.
really helpful in that overall journey of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So inspiring when you talk about those synchronicity, those moments, those things that kind of trigger. Again, it just seems like that's a theme that a lot of people I've been talking to lately are bringing up too. So I really appreciate you bringing that to light, because this is fiction, but I feel that it's something, your book has an impact that reaches a little bit deeper. It's a little bit more, right there, hitting the soul head on,
Yeah.
which I love. Another thing that you've done, Becky, or are doing, I should say, and it's because of the fact that you are a professional, the CEO of Pro Audio Voices. You're an expert in audio and you do audiobooks. That's your business side of you.
Right.
So talk about the audiobook of The Left Turn and how you recorded it, not just as a solo narrator, but you've done it with two voices, right?
Yes, yeah. I knew early on that I wanted to do it with two voices because I do have two protagonists there. The Hannah is the primary one, and then James is the other, and their their paths are parallel for a long time, for the first part of the book. And I really enjoy books that are written from more than one perspective, character perspective. I feel like it allows us to get a little deeper inside each one in that way. So, so when we recorded the audiobook, J.S. Arquin was my narrator who did James, and then I did the Hannah's voice, and it was so delightful working with him. And there's a later in the book, when they do come back together, these two characters come back together. We did that as a joint session. So we did, we were both in the same. We weren't in the same physical space, but we were on a call with each other so that we could interact, which was, it's so fun for us actors, especially if we're mostly working inside the booth, on our own, to be able to act with a partner. So that was really fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So now, and people can, because of the fact that you've got this company and this great audiobook recording. So people can get the audiobook now, right? It's
Yes.
available. Can you tell people the best place to go to get it?
Yeah, the best place is, so it's a bit.ly link, and so that's bit.ly/Geist, my last name, Geist, hyphen SU1, and that stands for Split Universe Book 1. So it's the numeral 1. Um, and it's a direct delivery option. So what that means for me and for my, people who are purchasing through that is that uh, that means that we're not having the middle company retailer taking a large portion of the royalties and control of the assets themselves. We are going to make it available very soon, on all the audiobook platforms, and then also print and ebook. But I wanted to start here first. As you say, it's my area of expertise. It's what I most love. And I think that the audiobook experience is so powerful, partly because, most of the time we're listening with through headphones or earbuds, such that we're right inside, right? It's so intimate. We're right inside the head of our listeners, and I think that the acting itself, it just feels like such a warm, intimate experience.
It absolutely is. I must confess, Becky, I listen to most of my books.
Yeah, me too.
Even books that are in print, if I can, I have a reader, and I just use the one that's available in Word. It's a little
Mhm.
stilted, it's robot voice,
Yeah,
but I think you're right. Listening and hearing, it's then the character becomes like your own narrator voice within your head, and that experience is so intimate
yeah,
and just so much more fulfilling.
yeah.
Um, I think different people are different. And I know that. I've met people who they're better as auditory listeners or learners. There are some people who are more visual. I know I'm very visual too. There's a lot of things. I want to map it out. I want to draw it out.
Yeah.
And there are some people who do. They read it and they absorb it better. So
Right.
I think that's the beautiful thing with having the audiobook and the print book and everything. You get that the ability to enjoy the story the way that you want.
Right.
And you bring up such a good point. I do want to touch on this because in the world of independent publishing, you're right, the creators, the people who are making the marvelous works, the stories, when they're putting it out there, it's hard sometimes because there are, people in the middle that can handle the distribution. So I think it is important, like you point out, that we support the independent creator as much as possible.
Right. Yeah.
Do you want to talk?
It's a little bit like shopping local,
Yeah.
Yeah. Shopping direct.
Yeah. If you can, go into the local shop rather than going on to the big site that aggregates them,
Right.
because they're taking a big chunk out of it.
Right.
Do you have any advice, since you do work with a lot of authors and you're producing their audiobooks in the world of independent publishing? Any advice that you have for other writers?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess I do. So I would say, first of all, I'm always encourage people to, follow your heart and follow your passion. And, but also one of the really big things that I've learned powerfully over the last 4 years or so is work with a team, because to try to do everything ourselves, we actually just wear ourselves out and don't get as far. When we work with a team, we can go so much farther and have lots of people working, doing their piece of expertise. And I think that that is incredibly valuable. I wish that I had really understood that decades ago. Um, Now, in some ways, I was very familiar with working with teams because, in theater, where it's very much an ensemble kind of experience, whether you're backstage or on stage. But I think in business for many years, I really just thought I couldn't afford to hire people or, contract with people. For indie authors, it's you're not generally hiring somebody. It's just, you're working with vendors who are helping provide their expertise. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice is find your team and work with them.
Yeah. And, as somebody who's with the Bay Area independent publishers, it's good to have a community too, to find organizations, whether you're in the Bay Area or the West Coast or not. That's a great organization, but there's other ones out there,
Yeah,
just finding other writers, writer groups,
that's
people
right.
that can.
Yeah, having that community, having that support, yeah. And Bay Area Independent Publishers Association, I've moved to Portland, Oregon, and I'm still president. We're now, committed to doing our meetings virtually. Um, we'll figure out if we're gonna go back in person in some format, but we're going to continue with the online so that we can serve more people around the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one of the benefits from the pandemic is it gave people permission, allowed them to, and maybe forced them out of that comfort zone of we have to be local, we have to be in this area. And all of a
Yeah,
sudden, boom, no, anybody can be global. And
yeah.
you're right, being able to attend meetings and to do conferences, workshops, and things like that online, it just opens up a whole new world for writers.
Yeah, it does. It's so valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Becky. So again, let's let people know where they can go and directly download the audiobook, and then let people know where they can find you online, your website, and find the actual the book in print as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, so it's bit.ly/Geist hyphen SU, the number one. That's for the audiobook, and that's where that will always be available. It will, as we release the other formats and in other platforms, as well as any other updates, we're doing events and promotions and stuff. You can go to beckyparkergeist.com to find all of that. Yeah, and to stay up to date.
Excellent. Becky Parker Geist, thank you so much for joining us on the Books That Make You show.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for being here as well. You can always find out more on the Books That Make You website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. Also, follow us on Facebook. We're on Instagram, as well as TikTok, and of course, YouTube. Sign up for our Webby Award-winning newsletter so that you're always up to date on fabulous authors and guests that we have on the show, like Becky. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.